Morning all. I found a very interesting historical game of Magnus Carlsen when he was just 12 years old. It was in the Politan Cup of 2003, played in Copenhagen, and his opponent was Hans K. Herstedt. Okay, so Magnus kicked off with e4, and Hans played e5. After knight f3, knight c6, we see a Lopez. Magnus retreats the bishop, most standard move rather than the exchange variation. After castles b5 here, now bishop e7. After rook e1, black plays d6. So no Marshall Gambit or anything here is planned, just d6. So c3 now, and black castles. After h3, black plays knight a5. It's all standard kind of moves so far. Black is often stretching on the queen side with c5 after moving this knight, and indeed that's what happens here. c5, d4, queen c7. Magnus proceeds with knight bd2. Black encourages now the closing of the centre with knight c6. Now often this move is a little bit controversial sometimes, because black later can just move that knight back and maybe use the c5 square. So sometimes players keep the tension here. Magnus chooses to play d5 here though. And now a4, rook a7, indirectly now protecting the rook, so that ab, queen, is protecting the rook. Knight f1, the knight ventures maybe on a journey, usually to g3 or e3 and eyeing f5. g6, weakening some dark squares, but discouraging this journey in advance for a knight to come to f5. And also maybe g6 could be useful for a later f5 from black. For the moment though, the bishop kicks the rook on f8 to e8, and now knight g3. Okay, after knight d7, Magnus now plays knight h2. With this space advantage here, it seems easier for white to try and play on the king side for the moment. Black battens down the hatches with f6, possibly against f4, so it seems black's preparing for the worst. Bishop e3 takes the bishop out of the opponent's territory, back in territory, and maybe the idea now is f4 and maybe f5 potentially. Okay, it also means that on the other side of the board, b4 might also be painful for black at some point for this diagonal here. So it's keeping some flexibility by doing that retreat. Knight b6, is the bishop a target for knight c4s now? Well, actually, a takes b5 is played. A takes b5, and bishop d3 covers that c4 square, and not minding an exchange of rooks here. Black plays bishop d7, and now queen d2. Okay. Knight f7. So that's 1 point. If the bishop had remained on h6, it would have been a target anyway for that knight coming to f7. White takes on a7 now and plays queen e2, targeting b5. Black protects b5, so it's sort of these pieces are quite flexible, it seems. The knights are ready to pounce on the king side. Knight g4. Okay, knight h6 needs to be considered now by black. Black covers up the h6 square with king g7. And then we see bishop c1, which protects b2, maybe prophylaxis against the queen invasion, or knight a4s or knight c4s, that the b2 pawn is not so vulnerable. Knight a4 is played here, attacking b2 anyway. Now we see bishop c2. Okay, rook a8. And now queen e3 looks like a strange battery. You usually want your bishop in front of the queen, not the queen pointing at a square, which is already protected by the knight. So you might think this is quite strange to play queen e3. On the other hand, knight h6 could drive away the defensive knight for a moment. So that's to be taken into account. So c4 is played here. And now rook f1, indicating that maybe an access route to the king will be the f pawn, or maybe even f5. So these options of using the f pawn. Black has basically released some of the tension with that c4 pawn move. So giving white a potentially freer hand. But is black trying to make use of c5 in this position, or reroute the bishop? Is it dangerous to reroute the bishop? Is the bishop needed defensively? Knight c5 makes use of that dark square. Now knight h6 drives away the defensive knight somewhere. It goes aggressively though into near white's position with knight g5, eyeing h3 as well. Now here, interestingly, Magnus plays f4, and after e takes, he doesn't play rook takes f4 here. He plays queen takes f4, which seems to be setting himself up for a cheap tactic, which black plays, a cheapo tactic. Bishop takes h3, with the idea that now, if g takes, of course, there'll be a knight fork, which would be very embarrassing for the 12-year-old. But the 12-year-old has something in mind here, a beautiful conception, actually. A very beautiful conception from this position, getting a lot of new access routes open to the black king. And it starts off with the move queen h4. So this pawn sacrifice, what has it gained? Well, it's gained time here to start off with, because queen on h4 is protecting now the knight, and bishop takes g5 seems to be threatened now with queen takes, holding on to the knight. So the bishop scurries back to d7. And now we see a kind of Penrose versus Tal situation, where Penrose spectacularly defeated Tal in one of the Olympiads with a thematic break in the centre, and namely e5. It looks a little bit like that. Look at these bishops down at black's kingside. Look at g5, g6. There's a lot of scrutiny being placed, in fact, on the black kingside after this move, and that scrutiny is about to increase greatly. So black clearly cannot take here, otherwise bishop takes g5, so he tries the other pawn. Okay, now can you guess what Magnus plays in this position if I give you 10 seconds starting from now? Okay, you want to rip open these lines like this diagonal. He plays, on the first course, is knight h5 check. So he sacrifices knight, a bit tal-esque here. And you might wonder what the exact purpose is. And so did black. And it would seem unwise to do anything apart from take this knight. Stepping in with the king doesn't seem such a hot idea, because, for example, and without checking this with engine at this point, the discovered check here seems a bit lethal with bishop takes g5, holding on to f6. Seems very damaging. But we'll check in the second pass various possibilities. Here black took on h5, wondering what would be next. And can you guess what Magnus played in this position? So you might want to pause the video or just take 10 seconds to guess. So 10 seconds starting from now. Okay. Magnus plays queen takes g5. Check. Queen sacrifice. Not too many possibilities for black here, other than to accept. If king f8, then surely queen g8 is mate. If king h8, then surely knight f7 is mate. So can't really be declined here, it would seem. So black takes that, and now another forcing move with check, rook f7 check, and it doesn't matter where the king goes now. It took on h6. If it goes to h8, there's a similar ending. And here the game ended with rook takes h7 mate. A beautiful game for Magnus when he was just 12, rated on the FIDE rating scale just 2385, which is pretty high for a 12-year-old. 2385, not bad. Better than most club players' FIDE ratings, I think. So his opponent, Hans, was 2249, and so was blown away in the Roy Lopez. Let's have a look again at this game with engine inspection, just to see what was going on from an engine point of view. So standard Roy Lopez, let's skip this opening book scenario. Okay, now here d5, the engine actually likes d5, closing up the position. It might be in this exact position the move to play. In some circumstances d5 is not so attractive, but here maybe it is the move to play. Okay, and now a4, so the knight is a little bit passive on d8, and the bishop's hemmed in on e7. So I think white's here is doing well according to an engine. It's like doing a small advantage, and now after that g6, even better. Okay, knight h2, bishop coming back to e3, good move here. Because this f6 had set up knight f7, so the bishop comes out of harm's way in advance. Okay, now takes on b5, takes, no, he doesn't take on a7, he plays bishop d3 now. He's trying to provoke black to fix the pawns on the queen side with c4 soon, so to release that tension on the queen side, then he wouldn't have to worry about the queen side so much. So white's still doing okay. Now this, we see this queen a6, not playing c4 just yet, covering h6 with the king. Okay, bishop c2, and it looks technically as though black's equalised, but from a human point of view there looks to be danger here. Look at all these dangerous pieces. Basically, essentially, they are looking at the black king. They're a bit blocked in by this pawn, this c1, but these knights are looking to pounce. It looks dangerous from a human perspective, I believe, this position. So queen e3, now c4. So is black really making use of that c5 square? Rook f1. It's funny. Engine likes bishop a4. This is a beautiful attacking piece later. What a tragedy it would be. It would have been to have given away that bishop here. So rook f1, knight c5. Now knight h6. Off the knight g5. I think the engine starts changing its tune after f4, starting to realise the dangers here. If knight d8, let's have a quick look. Now here there's knight hf5 check. What's going on here? If we take queen h6, knight h5, knight takes f6, queen takes, e takes f5, crushing position, threat, queen g6. There's numerous threats. Let's carry on a bit. And it's a crushing position. So this kind of blow with the knights is very interesting to consider. And look at that bishop again. Beautiful, beautiful bishops. An extra piece here basically in terms of the pawn. Let's continue this. If black doesn't sacrifice a piece, or let's go with this. Bishop d1 coming in like this. I think we get the picture that it's basically carnage. Okay, carnage. So basically knight g5, blocking the diagonal, and you might think, well, hang on a sec, what about h4? Is black really going to play king takes h6? Let's have a quick look at h4. Was that really the cunning idea of the 2249 with black, to play the cheeky king takes h6? Engine likes it. What would happen here after hg? It looks blocked up. We're blocked up. So h4 might not be the best. So Magnus doesn't bring the knight back though. If he plays knight g4 again, it's not really as accurate, it seems. Queen b6, just on this superficial analysis. So he just leaves that knight there. He plays f4. And let's have a look at this. What is going on here? E takes... Now if rook takes f4, haven't we again got king takes h6? Cheeky. After h4 again, king g7, and again blocked up. It's in the wrong hands, this position gets blocked up basically. In the hands of a genius, this position, it doesn't. So queen takes f4 is the move here. And you might wonder, well, hang on, king takes h6 here? Let's have a quick look. In this position, h4 is with a difference, isn't it? If the king scurries back, isn't it going to be hg and queen f7? So let's have a quick look at king g7, hg here, g takes, and there's some differences here. Knight h5 check. What is going on here? Queen g5 check. Queen takes. Rook takes. e5 here. Again, opening up that beautiful bishop. And this is technically good for white. So it requires perhaps a lot of calculation in this sort of game. Anyway, you get the picture that white's doing very well here. So, okay, so black didn't want to take with the king, so we get the idea that h4 is strong there. Black took on h3, which is a source of tempo gain after queen h4, and that's the strong move approved by Houdini as well. Bishop goes back. And now we get this e5, which at the moment it looks as though bishop e3 is also strong, but then e5 is checked out at a certain depth with this knight sack idea. So this really tears apart from this position the black king side. If you look at it, these pieces are just on the wrong side of the board, aren't they? You've got major attacking pieces on this side of the board. Two knights, queen and two bishops. It's just ripe for just ripping black's king position apart. So it's done so with the Penrose Tal type move e5 in the centre, as though that classic Benoni game, which I suggest you look up if you haven't seen it already. So d takes e5, then check is the one of the crushing moves here. Okay, so in this position, if king takes, as I mentioned, I think check. Let's double check there. Bishop takes g5 is strong. If h5 here, knight takes, bishop takes. This is all really strong stuff. So black's in real trouble. His cheapo has been taken against him for tempo gain for this crushing combinatory finish with queen takes g5. That's the move. Forced mate. I hope you enjoyed that. Comments or questions on YouTube. Thanks very much.